On the borders of Derbyshire and Leicestershire, tucked away in a hollow, there's a huge mansion called Calke Abbey. It takes its name from an old monastery which used to be there. Unlike many stately homes, there are no streams of visitors. The only signs of life are the grazing deer. In 1621, the huge estate was sold to a very wealthy family, and nearly 300 years ago, the owner, Sir John Harpur-Crewe, built this mansion. Apart from a few alterations, like the addition of these pillars, the house looks much the same as when it was built. But time has left its scars on these weathered walls, and the sundial has marked the passing years of family history. Entering the house was a little creepy. The entrance hall was dominated by heads of long-horned cattle who seemed to gaze down disapprovingly. But the fire was welcoming, as was the present owner of Calke Abbey, Mr. Harpur-Crewe.
Hello.
Nice to meet you.
And you.
Would you like me to show you around the house?
I'd love to. You'll be my guide. There's a lot to see, I should imagine,
Plenty.
judging from the hallway. Lovely flagstones on the floor here.
Yes, they are. They take a bit of cleaning, though.
I bet. Very impressive staircase.
But it's a lovely staircase.
Very panelling.
Yeah.
Good set of banisters here, Mr. Harpur-Crewe. Did you used to slide up and down those when you were little?
Yes, I did. But I daren't now, because I think I should break them.
Oh, isn't that courtyard beautiful?
It is. That's the old part of the
The
house.
stone's such a lovely colour, isn't
Yes.
it?
Mr. Harpur-Crewe told me he had some work to do on the accounts, because it's an expensive place to run. But he invited me to discover the place for myself.
I'll have a good explore.
Yeah.
Thank you. This magnificent stateroom is as grand as you'd find in any of the country's mansions, but Calke Abbey is a stately home with a difference. And that's because the history of the Harpur-Crews is somewhat out of the ordinary. About 200 years ago, the third Sir Henry Harpur-Crewe was a very shy and withdrawn man. He hated company and social life. In fact, he became more and more of a recluse. His neighbours, not surprisingly, called him the isolated baronet. But he was a very enthusiastic naturalist. He was particularly keen on birds. He had them preserved and stuffed and even displayed them here in the saloon. And this enthusiasm didn't die with him. Many of his descendants were keen on birds too, and the whole house began to fill up with display cases. In fact, there are so many of them that it feels rather as if the birds might take over, just like in the Hitchcock film. The Harpur-Crews didn't just take after the isolated baronet by becoming naturalists. Many of them were recluses too. They hardly ever left the house and grounds, and they seldom received any visitors. Must have been very dull for their families. In 1856, the Lady Harpur-Crewe of the time did up this drawing room in the height of Victorian style. But her plans for her social life were not to be. She used to complain, "I might be allowed to do more like other people and have a few friends sometimes. It would cheer me and do me good." But the room was hardly used, so it remains largely unaltered, with the elaborate furnishings carefully preserved under dust covers and the clutter of ornaments round the room. Historians say that this is the finest example of a Victorian drawing room anywhere in Britain. But the rest of the house presents a very different face. Calke Abbey has over 50 rooms, but less than half a dozen are regularly used by Mr. Harpur-Crewe. Upstairs, in bedroom after bedroom, piles of accumulated possessions lie untouched. For at Calke, successive generations never cleared out their predecessors' belongings. They simply closed the door and moved to another room. I simply couldn't believe my eyes as I passed one room of junk after another. I was drawn into one dark room full of toys and treasures that had lain undisturbed for years and years. This was once the schoolroom for children who didn't go away to school but used to spend day after day here, taking their lessons from a governess. There are toys in here as well, like this wonderful doll's house here. Could well have been made on the spot by one of the estate carpenters. It must have looked absolutely beautiful when all the paint was still gleaming and before the furniture got broken.
Toys had been left lying around as if the children had just gone out for tea. This Noah's Ark caught my eye. I could imagine them happily whiling away a rainy afternoon, arranging the animals 2 by 2. They must have loved them dearly. Hardly any of them were broken. They were almost as beautiful as the toy animals I used to have. I could have played with them for hours. But the children brought up here grew up out of touch with the outside world. One of those children was this serious little boy. He was called Vauncey, after a remote medieval ancestor.
This used to be his room when he was a boy. At first glance, it seems just cluttered and rather forbidding, but looking round, I can see a lot of his treasures are still here.
I just couldn't resist delving into a box or two.
He probably played with this jigsaw puzzle at about the same time that photograph was taken. And I wouldn't mind betting that this dear little horse and cart was a favourite toy.
Like his family before him, he loved collecting things. But what started as a hobby became an obsession.
All his life, he was a keen naturalist, the keenest of all the Harpur-Crews, and he was specially interested in birds and butterflies. Shut away in these cupboards is his butterfly collection, case after case after case of it, and all beautifully arranged.
It must have taken years to build up a collection like this. When Vauncey grew up, he became Sir Vauncey Harpur-Crewe, the owner of Calke Abbey. He made no changes in the house and became more and more of a recluse. Even after the start of the 20th century, he never allowed a car or any other motor vehicle to enter the park.
This dashing young man is his son Richard. His outlook on life was very different. Machinery was his passion. Cars, steamboats, and something new in his day, aeroplanes. Here on his bedroom wall is a photograph of him flying, with his name proudly recorded underneath. If he'd succeeded his father and become the owner of Calke Abbey, it's likely that he would have made a few changes and brought the house into more modern times. But sadly, that wasn't to be. He died before his father, leaving 3 sisters. Unfortunately, Sir Vauncey couldn't stand their company, and he used to send them letters carried by a servant on a silver salver, or even through the post, although they were all living in the same house. Sir Vauncey died in 1924 as a very old man, and his daughter Hilda inherited the property. She only made a few changes, like cutting the number of servants from 27 to half a dozen, and installing modern plumbing.
That meant there was no further use for all these jugs and basins, and they've sat here in a dingy corner gathering dust ever since. Little else was changed or even moved. In the book room, stacks of valuable first editions and other unread books rot away together. A Georgian 4-poster still stands, looking for all the world like a prop from the Sleeping Beauty. Old journals and newspapers lie where they were tossed down carelessly, perhaps after only a casual glance. There's even a parcel addressed to Lady Harpur-Crewe, sent from the Isle of Wight in 1894.
Below it all is this kitchen, which was actually used in living memory, although it looks rather more as though it hasn't been used for about 100 years. On the wall is a message to the cook and her staff: waste not, want not. I wonder if that's why nothing was ever thrown away by the family living upstairs. The huge clock has stopped, of course. It could be the symbol for all those isolated baronets who've lived at Calke Abbey, the house where time stands still.